So other interesting things here dealing with this sexual fidelity. Prior to the 20th century, I don't want to say sexual fidelity, no one cared, but people were less likely to divorce over it. If the male did it, not if the females did it. Why? I say this, and you're like, that's horrible. But think about it, there's no birth control, so every time you had sex with your partner, what's a possibility? Pregnant. And that's a real concern. I remember, I want to say it's Freud, but I don't want to quote on that. I remember reading something about him, like he and his wife agreed to stop having sex so they wouldn't have any more kids. But if you want to have sex, guess who you might go to? What? Like a prostitute, or have another partner, and that was considered as a safety valve.
They would have taken for it.
Well, let's see. Who am I legally responsible for? Any kid I have, or
just the one with your wife?
Just the ones that we call legitimate. I mean, we look at these and go, that's an antiquated word, but it was a word that governed society for many, many years. Not just a year or two, hundreds of years, where it's like, oh, I had a child with this woman, I'm not legally required to care for it at all, versus I have a child with you, you're my wife, I do. We don't see it that way anymore, but that's our current idea. We also see sex as this barometer of a relationship, right? Think about it. You're giving your friend advice. They come to you and they say, you know, my husband or my wife hasn't wanted to touch me in a while. We might go. What? We might go cheating, or let's say I go, we have not, like, I will tell you, give you some sad news on camera. Like, this isn't about me, so not sad news about me. Many, many couples who have been married for long periods of time have these massive drops in their sex life. On average, married couples have sex roughly once a week, but some couples go months and months during dry spells. So now they come to you for advice, and we make sex to be the glue, the bond that holds us together. We might say, find someone else. That is a very recent thing to do. That is very, very recent. Right? We make sex the cornerstone. Anybody else worried about that? No, I mean, think about it. If I make sex the cornerstone of our relationship, you know, and then as time does, it marches on, everything starts to flag. Oh, I want to feel that again. You're a perfectly good person. No, I'm going to find someone else. Versus saying, me and them get along, me and them. I'm already looking for two. Me and him or her get along. This is y'all saying, I don't know who you want. Him or her get along. You know, we have a lot of activities in common. You know, whatever. We go. We don't say that. We say, take pills, or this worries me. Does worry me. Well, all right, moving along. Though individuals were engaging in sexual behavior, they were doing activities. Women were told not to do this. They were told to resist. And they were also often told they had no sexual desires. This is in the West. Other countries felt differently about this issue. So think about this. Think about from the time that you're a little girl, I mean, many go experience this already, but that you had no desires, none. There are letters written from this period where men would write their wives, begging their wives to remain chaste and virtuous to redeem them, redeem the guy. They're like, I'm so pitiful, I can't control myself. And the women would write back, you know, be strong and virtuous. Does anyone read history? Because y'all look at me like I am mentioning, I'm like, in history, y'all are like, what is this time to speak of? There were people, get this, y'all are never going to believe this. There were people alive before you were born. And they did things. Yeah, I know it's going to be hard to believe, right? They didn't have color then. They I'm watching a lot of World War I documentaries, so I'm like, they don't have any color at this time period. I wonder when that got invented. With resistance came blame. If sex occurred, it was usually for the woman. It was usually blamed on the female for happening. It was said, how did you let this occur? I sometimes think, I am glad I'm a guy, because it's like, okay, you're supposed to resist, and if something happened, it's your fault. What about his for trying? That ain't his fault. You knew he was going to try.
Like, it's still, I know the way that my dad taught, like when he would try to have the sex talk with me, like it's always like it was my responsibility to make sure that it did not happen. Like,
Your responsibility.
it was like, this is the way that guys think about, like, when they're talking to girls, like, it's not when girls talk to each other about it, but when guys are like, well, it's your fault, you did it. So I think this is something that's perpetuated by men.
Oh no, not in my house. My dad was like, no babies. Yeah, no babies.
That's the entire sex talk. How are they made? I don't know.
But you're also
No,
a
he was just
guy.
saying being, responsible, because that was, coming
But you're
home
a
late
guy.
from curfew, you realize that was a girl involved. Was like, yes. He was like, all right, well, you use some protection. Yes, sir. He says, well, all right, well, look, this is, be responsible. This is your responsibility. It's not just her fault. This is you too. It's not just one person being involved here. So it's like,
No baby.
yeah,
No
babies.
But you're a guy.
But he's teaching responsibility. His dad's trying to teach responsibility.
For him, yeah, but like if a father
He's not telling me that,
tells
it's going to be
daughter-
her fault if she gets pregnant. He's like, dude, this is
No,
on
no,
you,
no.
man.
I didn't mean it like it's like your fault if you get pregnant. It's like it's like perpetuating the idea of like it is your responsibility to make sure that like
No sex happens.
no sex happens because guys are going to try, but it is your responsibility to make sure that human beings are does.
Yeah, people don't normally say to their daughters no babies, they say no sex.
Yeah.
Like, friends.
Well, it's an empirical question.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think how we would word this to get a numerical answer. Like we just go back to if y'all had a sex talk. So the sex talk I got was no sex. It was like good guys don't ask, good girls don't do. So we sort of got both into the spectrum.
Well, I got the eye roll from my mom too when my dad was saying that. She'd be like, and then the real sex talk.
So I guess this would be a question like we could numericize it by going, are males normally told babies and women told sex, or to go by, we have to think about how to phrase it. We could do that. But think about how to word it, we can ask it. Of course, males were expected to control their desires. People just thought males couldn't do so. We still see shades of this going on. This is one of the things that's happening in the cases in, is it Ohio, where this girl got raped, she went to a party and got raped. What?
Yeah, Ohio.
Steubenville,
Yeah.
Ohio. And like this really deeply bothers me, this idea that males can't control themselves. Like we're just going around 24/7 looking for someone to have sex with. I get deeply offended by this. I don't know about other males. It should be, but it's like this argument sometimes becomes that all males are potential rapists, and I get offended by it. But I also see that many times in our culture, we perpetuate this idea. Well, we'll say things like, what was she wearing? Had she been drunk? As if getting drunk is, oh, she let her defenses down, let's go. And I go, that's offensive. That is deeply offensive that we even have this conversation.
Yeah.
No, it is. It's like, that's how I feel it is. I feel like when we ask that, we imply that you're supposed to guard yourself, and oh, you failed. The barbarians can all come through because you let the gate down. There's a metaphor mixed in 1,000 ways. I find that offensive. I don't think because you've gotten drunk that's the barbarians can storm the gate. I think that's offensive.
in one of my classes, my teacher was, I think it was in the 1950s, there, you were in that class, there's like a little thing on like how not to get raped, and one of the things was like, don't ride in a car with your window down. Like, just like crazy stuff, like assuming that if a woman was just by herself, then she would get raped because men couldn't
Like a guy's going to jump through the
Yeah,
window.
it was crazy, it really was.
I mean, but this is really bad. I mean, but you really have to see that we've really done this. Like we're still doing this, right? That we're having a discussion 2013 about, well, you know, she had passed out, as if that somehow is okay versus, you know, not to say too much, but I have, let's just say, fallen asleep at parties. You know, it gets to be 10. You know, I've seen Matlock, and I go and fall asleep while everyone else is having fun. I don't know, Matlock, you know? No, I don't watch Matlock. I was trying to think of an old people show. I'm watching Andy Griffin, right? And so anyway, wherever else. So I have fallen asleep at parties, and I don't think that is like carte blanche to do whatever you want. And I think that even we have this discussion, we're still treating women as second class.
He was like convicted, right?
Two of them were.
Yeah, both of them are,
But one of them got a year or so.
One was trying to sentence
Yes, stop it.
as an adult, and then one was sentenced as a juvenile.
Yeah, one was sentenced as an adult, one sentenced as a juvenile. I mean, this is actually way more nuanced than this. We're having a tough time in our culture because females are finally being seen as fully sexual, but then we're still saying it's your fault. And we're saying you can wear whatever you wish, and we're also saying be careful, and we're saying new things to guys. We're in this really weird thing where we have to negotiate the rules. And I think a legitimate one is to say, the person has to say yes. You know, it's a crazy one. It's a crazy idea of saying that. They have to say yes. In the 20th century, though, we start seeing some changes in relationships. Sex and sexual adjustment. I give you this one because this one seems so natural to our way of thinking. We actually have this view now of try before you buy, right? Because most of us would not think of getting married now without, now people do, right? There are shows about them, right? Was there, the Learning Channel had Virgin Diaries, was that the show called? Do you remember this? Last year.
Yes.
What was it called?
I think it was Virgin Diaries.
Virgin Diaries,
Yeah.
these 30-year-olds, 35. What's weird for me is even in my own lifetime, that being a 35-year-old virgin has gone from, okay, kind of nice to, what is wrong with me? It's sort of weird. And I'm reminded of Chaucer, as I always am. What? Geoffrey Chaucer, right? He in one of his stories, and I remember which one, complains, he's like, no one would buy a horse without riding it first. Why do we marry women and never see them naked? If someone can track down that quote, I'd give points for that. It's in one of his short stories. It had to even be Chaucer to make your life more difficult. I am old. I was there. I knew him though. Chaucer. This is weird though. Here's what worries me. This is a question. Has sex become a commodity in relationships? Where it's like, I have to know not only are we sexually compatible, but if you have whatever kinks and paraphilias, and that's PY372, take it, great class. We have to go, we got to make all of those work too. You know what I mean? I don't know, worries me.
What if you marry someone sexually?
I mean, there's lots of things you could, here's what got me thinking along that line is I started, I had this question. I went, females need to be lubricated for sex to happen. And how did they deal with that in history? Like I was like somewhere somebody had to have noticed that it is beneficial to not just grab your partner and have sex with them. So I was like, how do they deal with female? This was like my thought process for 2 years, right? I'd go into used bookstores, I'd do research on the internet, and I was like, somebody has to have discussed this in history. I realize that sounds very perverse to think of it that way, but I'm like, somebody has. And I finally found books from the book was written discussing the history from like 1400 to 1800, and they finally discussed that females were given advice, and many leaders like did prohibitions against masturbation, but they'd say to women, well, if you need to get ready, then do so. It's like people knew that they had to. And so this sexual adjustment, that was actually a problem for many years.